King's Dark Tidings Book 7 is upon us, guys. It releases November 11th and is titled Ritual of Ruin. Also, doesn't it look like Rezkin is fighting some kind of mechanized warrior in the cover art? I wonder what that's all about. But there's a lot of things to remember from the previous 6 books in the series, which is why I'm here to go over all of the major events that you'll need to know to dig your teeth into Book 7. I'm going to go over just the main parts of the plot of each book, just enough to hopefully jog your memory on some of the more important twists and turns that we've experienced up to this point. I'm sure there's things that I've forgotten to include, but I'm hoping that I have all the major necessary plot beats in order for you to grasp what we've got going on up until this point. If there's anything I've forgotten, then please leave some comments down below with whatever you think should have been mentioned. Now, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways, spoilers for everything up through Book 6, Night of Shadows. If you haven't read the series before, this is not a substitute for reading it for yourself. Go back and enjoy the series how it was intended to be enjoyed, and come back if you need a refresher before Book 7. You can also use the chapter markers down below to jump to any of the books in the series if you need specific refreshers, and there will be little to no future spoilers from book to book in this recap. So if you've only read up to, I don't know, like book 3 and need a refresher for starting book 4, then you're safe to watch through to the point you left off at in your reading. Also, real quick, this is the first official video or episode I've recorded since moving into my new studio, so let me know down in the comments what you think of it, and if there's anything you think I should change, let me know down there too. I'm going to be putting up some better soundproofing, so sorry if this video or our next couple episodes are a little echoey. Hopefully that'll change when I get some soundproofing up on the walls here. Another quick thing before we get started, I recently got my King's Dark Tidings tattoo. I'll put it up on screen here, and Kelcade said that she'd put it up on her website in the fan art section, which is pretty exciting. It was about 6 or 7 hours in the chair, and I'll be honest, it was pretty brutal, and I'm sure that Rezkin would be appalled at the number of rules I broke, but maybe a little proud of some of the rules that I followed, like Rule 43, Fight Off Fatigue, and Rule 156, Do Not Die. But anyways, as always, our links are in the description, so check those out, like our Patreon page where you can see episodes like future interviews with Kelcade weeks before YouTube gets to see them, and you'll get to talk with her live in the chat. With the housekeeping out of the way, let's get on with it, because this is going to be a long one. Book 1, Free the Darkness. We see a man drop baby Rezkin off at the fortress and is likely killed afterwards. We have gotten confirmation from Kelcade herself that this was a random servant of the king, although in my heart this mysterious character will always be Conovan. We then see years of Rezkin's training where Masters Pater and J.R. Dune teach young Rezkin to always be silent, to trust no one, and to be one and alone. Setting his own broken bones instead of relying on others for help, they teach him to sneak, to fight, to deceive, and to steal and kill, and of course, the coveted rules. Upon Rezkin's completion of his training at 19 years old, he still needs to learn of the final 2 rules, and is given one last task: kill the strikers. A massive fight breaks out, which Rezkin kills all of the strikers except for one, and that would be Farson, who observes Rule 245, retreat when you cannot win. Meanwhile, the 2 masters were locked in a heated battle against each other, and they both wind up dead, but not before Pater gives Rezkin the final 2 rules with his dying breaths. He's delusional from the loss of blood and tells him that Rule 2 is kill with conscience, and Rule 1 is protect and honor your friends. Quick spoiler for Book 2, so just fast forward about 10 seconds if you haven't read that yet. But we know that these 2 final rules to actually be kill without conscience and protect and honor your king, but Pater drops the ball on this one, leaving Rez to wonder what a friend is. Rezkin collects various armaments throughout the fortress, including the 2 Shaylin blades that are meant for sword bearers, champions of the kingdom given authority by the king himself. Rezkin considers leaving the swords behind since you can be executed for carrying them if they aren't yours by issue of the king, except in a note tied to the sheath it reveals that he is in fact given the authority of a sword bearer. Now, if you don't know, Shaylins are basically one-of-a-kind swords. Nobody can replicate them, and the king will grant them to certain people in the kingdom and give them some form of authority. In the certificate, it says their name, a brief description of them. Maybe it'll say like what they did for the kingdom, how they earned this authority. And then there's an authority section that'll say, this person has the authority to execute criminals, or this person has the authority to take missives to the king, or they have the authority to act as, a judge and jury in, local disputes or something like that. So there's always an authority tied to it. However, in Rezkin's case, there is no authority there. It's signed by King Bordrin, and it has his name and a description of him and everything, but it doesn't say what he's done for the kingdom, and it doesn't say what his authority is. Now, you can look at this in a couple different ways. It can either mean that he has no authority, or it means that he has every authority. Now, this letter, this certificate, is sealed by a mage. It makes the person reading it believe that it's real because it is. So Rezkin goes out into the outworld in search of Farson. Justine is the first city he comes across, a sprawling city with a large estate at its center. Here he meets Frisha and Tam. And while having lunch, Frisha offhandedly calls Rezkin her friend, which pings his Rule 1 quandary that he's been mulling over, because he doesn't really know exactly what a friend is. He's heard the term, but he doesn't know how it relates to him. So he thinks that friends are some secret order of people that have been assigned to him. And so when he hears friend, he thinks it's code from Frisha, like she's slyly being like, hey, I'm one of the friends. I'm one of the people you're supposed to look out for and to find. And so this pings his friend Spidey sense, and it launches basically the entire plot of the rest of the series. If this had not happened, maybe it would have happened with somebody else further down the line, but the story would be way, way different. This launches everything. Rezkin offers to escort Frisha and Tam to Kybane, but Tam is hesitant to allow this strange new man into their lives. After some great back and forth between the two, Tam acknowledges that they may need Rezkin's help more than they thought. Tam and Frisha become Rezkin's first two capital F friends, a prestigious and not easily earned position in Rezkin's mind. We'll see this repeat throughout the series. Someone being a friend does not happen easily. Besides this first time, it happened pretty easily this first time, but from here on out, it's a much harder position to gain. During their time in Justine, before they head off on their voyage, Rezkin realizes he needs a spy network, so naturally he takes over all the local thieves guilds, because why wouldn't you? He's gonna have them be his eyes and ears, but also he tasks them with not stealing from the nobility, but specifically stealing the parabata leaves that are used for ink, a deadly and addictive street drug. Why? We don't know yet. An important set of characters from this storyline are Attica, a seductive but slightly hesitant girl who, and kind of awkward too, who he makes the leader of the Diamond Claw Guild. Adston, who is the Serpent Guild's second in command, is now promoted to Guildmaster after Rezkin kills the original Guildmaster of both guilds. Adston is a very refined gentleman, mimicking the mannerisms of the nobility, and one of the best stealth masters in the guilds. Lastly is Benny, a young sneak who Rezkin pulls from the Diamond Claws to train with Adston in the Serpents. This will show up again in a future book. Rezkin moves some nobility around by killing Lord Addercroft and installing his son as the new head of the Addercroft house. Rezkin procures everything he needs for the voyage, and the three friends head out on a riverboat for the next stop on their journey. This is where he meets Lieutenant Jimson and his men, who believe Rezkin is a high-ranking military officer, even though he outright tells them he is not. Jimson quickly becomes loyal to Rezkin and is willing to have his back at every turn. Rezkin starts training Tam and Frisha in the way of the sword, but Frisha decides it is not for her. Later, Rezkin instead buys her a set of throwing knives and Tam a beautiful longsword. Frisha quickly falls for Rezkin, especially when he gives her the green scarf that he bought for her. Tam later informs him that Frisha is now his girlfriend, expected to be married someday, and Tam is his best friend. These two positions are at the top of the hierarchy above all other friends. I should also note here that this hierarchy obviously is only a thing in Rezkin's mind. It's not an actual way that this world works. He's just trying to understand all of this in his own way, and Tam is just speaking about these things like a normal person would. Along the river, the group encounters many bandits. On one of these occasions, Rezkin brings back a prisoner who tells them there are more bandits ahead. Later, they make camp, and in the middle of the night, they are ambushed by at least a dozen of them, and Jimson and his group hold their own, but Rezkin silently stalks through the forest and slaughters them wholesale. When killing the last bandit, Jimson sees Rezkin's blades and demands that he seize the letter of authentication and authority. He is relieved to find out that Rezkin had not stolen the blades. Also, this is where we find out that the letter has a mage seal on it, which forces the reader to believe it is authentic because, of course, it is. Frisha worries over Rezkin having to kill and thinks that he must be distraught about it, and it's so funny to see how little Frisha and Tam both know about Rezkin and the assumptions that they draw this early on in the story. That will all change very, very soon. Jimson pulls Rezkin aside and asks him questions about his level of skill and what or who he is. He then calls Rezkin friend, adding a third to the prestigious list. Jimson tells Rezkin of the King's Tournament, and Rezkin decides it is the perfect place to find out more information about the strikers as he is still pursuing Farson. Upon arriving at their penultimate stop, they meet Raylan, a petite blonde girl who says she is a warrior and has a feisty personality. Jimson is immediately smitten with her, and after some discussion, they decide to allow her on their journey as she hopes to go with them to the King's Tournament in Scutton. During this time, Frisha tells Rezkin that her uncle is General Markham of the Ashayan army, a renowned military leader who Rezkin has actually studied much of, and it's important to note here that he had no idea Markham was her uncle and therefore had no ulterior motives for being friends with her or Tam. Her mother was nobility who married a commoner, and Markham is her mother's brother, and he has offered to bring her into the peerage to be married to a noble who will hopefully give her a good life, although there's a lot of discussion about the nobility and how they marry and how she will probably always be seen as a commoner, even though she has, this noble lineage and is clearly part of a noble line. And even regardless of that, she's still like an amazing person. So she, the nobility will tend to look down on her regardless of any of that information. Along the way, Raylan becomes enamored with Rezkin and gets into many quarrels with Frisha as Frisha is now his girlfriend. Rezkin has an honest talk with Raylan, telling her that she needs to be nicer to Frisha and that he's not interested in anything from her, Raylan. One final bandit fight takes place, and several notable things happen here. Tam takes his first life and is clearly distraught about it, which will become a major plot point in Book 2. Rezkin executes a bandit who is on his knees right in front of Frisha, and she is horrified by the cold and detached look in his eyes. And lastly, Raylan is seriously hurt. She gets thrown into a tree, cracking 3 ribs, and is having trouble breathing. Jimson carries her to their next campsite on his horse, and Rezkin gives her many ointments and wraps her ribs with cloth. They arrive in Kybane. Rezkin is to stay at General Markham's estate, and Jimson admits that he was given a letter to deliver to the general. The letter is basically telling the general of this strange new sword bearer that had wandered into town. Rezkin asks Jimson to forego delivering the letter for a few days so that Rezkin can get to know the general on his own terms. Rezkin, Frisha, and Tam arrive at the Markham estate and are greeted by Lady Adelina, who dotes on them. When Markham arrives, he is immediately suspicious of Rezkin and seems to have an idea of who he might be and who he may be related to, which will become a very important plot point later on, even into the much later books and potentially this next book and the ones after that. Frisha mentions that she wishes to go to the King's tournament, and Markham immediately shoots it down, ultimately saying the only way she could go is with a husband or entering into a prime courtship, aka it's kind of like a fiance, the way that I understand it. Frisha is furious, of course, but later Tam tells Rezkin that he should ask Frisha to marry him. If he does not marry her soon, then somebody else will, and she cannot be his girlfriend anymore. Remember that Rezkin is very socially oblivious and doesn't understand most of this stuff until someone explains it to him like a 5-year-old. So this is the first time that Rezkin is really thinking about her, like she may have to leave the group at some point. And it's also important to note that, Rezkin follows these rules very strictly. And so rule 1 being protecting on your friends, he assumes that it means he has to be with these people at all times to protect them, because he sees this outworld and how these people live, and he's like, they can't protect themselves. And so he assumes that he has to be there protecting them all the time. And if Frisha is to get married, then she would leave. Like, she wouldn't be around Rezkin anymore. So how could he fulfill rule 1? So what does Rezkin do? He proposes the idea to General Markham, to which he says, absolutely not. Are you crazy? Jimson shows up with the note for Markham, and this is when he learns of the Shaylins that Rezkin holds. Rezkin tells him all about the fight at the fortress and reveals more to Markham than he reveals to anyone, even later on in the books. Even with all the knowledge and new information, Markham is not willing to allow Rezkin to marry Frisha, but promotes Jimson to captain and gives him an exquisite master blade that Rezkin actually picks out for him. Markham basically gives him the run of his war room. He says, you can pick any sword from here. They're all master blades, but some are better than others. And Rezkin went to the most expensive one, probably just to get back at Markham. Markham does have a grudging respect for Rezkin, but continually shoots down any chances of him marrying Frisha. He has an idea of who Rezkin is supposed to be and does not want Frisha anywhere near him. During this discussion, Rezkin realized that he may have actually been the target rather than the strikers during the fight at the fortress. When the order was given, everything happened super fast, and Rezkin now is kind of thinking about, maybe that order, whoever it came down from, what was supposed to happen was for all the strikers to kill Rezkin, but whoever gave the order did not expect Rezkin to actually be able to kill, 14 strikers or something like that? So Rezkin takes over the Assassin's Guild next by stealing the leader's dagger and then running the gauntlet with Brahm and the 2 kids from the Diamond Claw Guild, Ash and Broken. The gauntlet is a test where any man can walk down a forested road, not any forested road, a specific forested road, fending off assassins, but is not allowed to kill any of them. If the man or woman can reach the end, they are able to challenge the leader of the guild for their position. Rezkin does this with the young thieves in tow in order to make a spectacle of it and to have the kids apprentice to the assassins. Instead of killing the leader, Rezkin lets him live, and they call him Rael Gesh, meaning giver of life, rather than bringer of death, which would normally be the title of the leader of the Black Hall, the Assassin's Guild. The title refers to one who is so powerful he can afford to let his enemies live, as he wouldn't be worried about being attacked since he's so powerful. A slip, aka assassin, visits Markham and tells him that he has their protection and that someone tried issuing a contract on him. Rezkin previously gave the assassins a list of names that are absolutely not to be killed, but it's still a little weird that an assassin would visit Markham just to let him know that he has their protection. Something's going on here, I think. Markham ends up deciding that it's in Frisha's best interest to be away from whatever is going on with the Thieves and Assassins Guild, and probably best for her to stay close to Rezkin because he knows how skilled he is, and agrees to allow her to go to the King's Tournament with Rezkin. At first he thinks that he has the upper hand on Rezkin, but Rezkin already knew he was going to do this and has organized the entire thing to work in his favor, choosing who is on the ship and crew to head to the tournament. Markham is overwhelmed at this and has no idea how Rezkin did it, which is just icing on the cake. The book basically ends there with Markham wishing them luck on their way to the King's Tournament. Book 2, Reign of Madness. And I know, I'm wearing different clothes because I couldn't knock this all out in one sitting. And change is scary, I get it. I'm still the same me though, except I'm just wearing a hoodie and a hat now. But I'm not wearing pants. You know, for personal reasons. Book 2 opens with Rezkin and his new friends about to board a ship for Scutton. This is a voyage that Rezkin himself has carefully orchestrated to have some very specific people of the nobility on board. This is, in fact, Rezkin's voyage. There is no one in charge of it besides him, although the nobles do believe that Jimson is the leader of it all. Included in the nobility is Tyrone Nereus, the future Duke of Wellington, and possible future heir to the throne. We didn't really talk about him in the first book, but he did make an appearance. He spilled a bunch of wine on Frisha, and Rezkin got really mad. It seemed like he was going to kill him, and Tyrone was really scared. There was a moment of true fear from this noble who has never feared anything in his entire life, but this one interaction with Rezkin has really made an impact on him, and that carries through to this book. No spoilers or anything, but Tyrone is my favorite character of the entire series. So, if you know, you know. But he is a fantastic character, and Kelcade has done wonderful things with him. Next up is Malseus, Sheila, and Pallas Jubai. These are cousins of Frisha's. We have Brant Gerrand, another noble whose house doesn't really mean anything until much later on in the story, but Brant is a great character. He has plenty of things to say in this book, so another one to just remember and keep an eye on as the series goes on. Rezkin quickly disarms the nobles with his charismatic nature, and they have many talks including the responsibility of the nobility towards the common people and the current economic and political state of Ashai. These are all fantastic talks. They all train together and become significantly better sword wielders over the course of this book. As we go through this recap, I could go through scene by scene all the different times they practice, but I figured I'd just throw that out there, is that Rezkin ends up training them and training with them, and they all, Rezkin's already perfect basically, but everybody else becomes better sword wielders because of Rezkin's tutelage. They then arrive in Turning, where Rezkin meets Wesson, a natural-born battle mage who does not want to be a battle mage, but Rezkin thinks that he should embrace his abilities and be what he was born to be. That first night, the group notices a mob outside their inn where Striker Kai is being put on trial for killing the mayor's son. This trial is a total farce, and Rezkin reveals his Shaylins in order to take Kai into his own custody and find out the truth for himself. Later that night, Rezkin kills the magistrate and mayor when he realizes that they were involved in the assault of the young girl that is kind of being swept under the rug. All this whole trial is focused on Kai killing the mayor's son, but in the background there's this whole thing that the mayor's son had done with this young girl that they're just trying to quietly get out of the way. Kai is set free the next day after being healed by Raylan, who, by the way, is found out to be a healer even though she wants to be a warrior. And as Rezkin says, we have a battle mage who wants to be a healer and a healer who wants to be a warrior. Seems like some of us should just accept who we are. Kai then joins the voyage, declaring Rezkin as his king, which I'll explain in a second, but Rezkin now has his first vassal. After looking at the documentation for Rezkin's Shaylins, Wesson had revealed that King Bordrin had bestowed upon him complete autonomy, giving him more power than the king himself. Rezkin cannot be magically tracked and has more authority than anyone else in Ashai, allowing him to eventually claim the seat of the king if he wants to. They do believe that this was Bordrin's intent with this certificate of authority. They do believe that Bordrin wanted Rezkin to wrest the throne from Cadian and ultimately be named Bordrin's heir, or maybe to pass on the title of king onto someone else. Maybe there's another person that Rezkin can pass it on to. Also joining the voyage is Baron Nask of Fendendril and his son Waylon, who wishes to go see the tournament. This is once again all orchestrated by Rezkin himself. He had this all kind of master planned out ahead of time. During this voyage, Kai continually goes over Rezkin's head and tries to push him towards revealing himself as a possible heir to the throne, trying to gain new vassals for this new kingdom. And during this time on the ship, Tam has a falling out with Rezkin when he finds out what Rezkin has done at the fortress before he left, but realizes the error of his ways when he talks with Malseus, who explains the difference between a commoner and a noble, and how Tam can apologize. This is another great scene where Malseus kind of becomes a friend of Tam's, and he helps him understand the feelings that you're feeling are because you are used to dealing with other commoners and you're all kind of on the same playing field. But now with Rezkin being your best friend, the fact of the matter is you are not the same station, even though we all know Rezkin doesn't really see it that way. This is the way the nobility sees this friendship between Tam and Rezkin, and it's really, really important for the rest of the series because we see a big change in Tam where him and Rezkin are still best friends, but he does defer to Rezkin. He never insults Rezkin in public or anything like that. He always defers to him, and that's really important for the rest of Tam's storyline, especially in regards to Rezkin. He also talks to Frisha, who has another great scene, and she explains to Tam that someone in the kingdom has to be the executioner, and what a difficult job that must be. Oh, poor Frisha. You don't even know the half of it yet. She is right, though. One of my favorite lines from her is in this scene when she says, "Who thanks the executioner?" Fantastic scene, fantastic quote. I love it. Tam swears fealty to Rezkin, telling him he will always honor him and proclaim his good deeds in public and will be by his side whenever he is needed. Raylan follows soon after as we find out that she is already a rebel opposed to Cadian. This also comes back in a big way in the future. Also during this time, they have their big conversation about the Mad King. This is a king in ancient times who went mad, and they have a conversation about it. And Rezkin impresses just how serious the situation is to the nobles, and all of the characters kind of come to this consensus about how serious the situation is, not only for the commoners but especially for the nobles, because it will completely disrupt all of the noble houses. They can all be hanged for this treasonous talk, by the way, but they all agree that something needs to be done. It is then revealed that there is another option in the form of another king who could possibly take the throne, of course, thanks to Striker Kai. As we arrive in Scutton for the King's Tournament, Rezkin goes around claiming some more guilds and spending some time with Frisha. He and Wesson collect materials for the Disguise of Dark Tidings, which is the persona that Rezkin is going to use in this tournament. And Wesson shows him Celeric, a mage material that will make a mask that they can shape into anything they want using Vimara. They later realize that because of the way that Wesson crafted the mask, it only allows fresh air to flow into the mask, allowing Rezkin to breathe through dusty areas and even water. Rezkin is on the hunt for a Master Blade as he cannot use his enchanted Shaylins in the tournament, and this is where he finds the Black Blade, a blade made from a once-in-a-lifetime mage material that can never be reproduced, and it's shaped into a black sword with kind of this green lightning seemingly flowing throughout it. It's the same blade that I have in my King's Dark Tidings tattoo. Rezkin tells the blacksmith that if he is ever in need, or if Rezkin hears that he is looking for him, then he will find him and bring him to safety. At the tryouts for the tournament, Rezkin sponsors commoners because he wants to fight the best opponents, not the most wealthy ones. This is where we meet Issaria, a gorgeous redhead bombshell who can also wield a sword like a master. Palace's pants just got 2 sizes too small, and so did mine. Rezkin gets word that Tyrion requests an audience at the Duke's estate. When Rezkin shows up, Lord Hespian tries to attack him subtly with magic, and Rezkin just bounces it right back at him. Tyrion tells him that he overheard talk of them killing someone, and he thinks that they're talking about him. And Rezkin finds multiple attempts of someone trying to poison Tyrion. On the way back, he and Tyrion have a wonderful heart-to-heart where Tyrion thanks Rezkin and names him as a friend. Again, this prestigious position to which Rezkin simply nods, adding one more to the list of capital F friends. Just before this, Rezkin had told Tyrion that he engineered the entire voyage for the benefit of Frisha. Rezkin knows he will not get the blessing of the general and wanted to ingratiate Frisha with the nobility for them to watch out for her if he cannot. Tyrion agrees to do so, and we even later see him fulfilling this promise by introducing her to other nobility and calling her his friend, which may not seem like a lot, but in these circles it really is. Sometime during this part of the book, Malseus is also named a friend. Rezkin says, "If ever I could choose to count someone among my friends, it would be you, Malseus." These moments of someone being named an official friend are just some of my favorites in the series, just because we know what that word means to Rezkin and like how seriously he takes that, and the duty that he packs on when naming somebody a friend. It just means so much more, and they're just some of the greatest scenes in the series. Now, Rezkin and Tyrion make their way back to the inn, and Rezkin discovers that the poison was meant to make Tyrion look drunk, therefore destroying any credibility he has, and later they can go on, like whoever poisoned him can go on and say, well, remember Tyrion, like he was absolutely falling over drunk at the King's Tournament, like what kind of future heir would do that? During this scene, Tyrion figures out who Rezkin is. He says, "Who orders a striker around but the king?" Absolutely phenomenal scene, and Wesson says that Rezkin looks just like the royal family, prompting them to do a test to see if they're related, all via Wesson's magic. And bam, if the spell had worked any faster, Wesson would have thought that they were brothers, but they're most likely cousins. Rezkin is either the bastard son of Bordrin or of his brother Dacius. At night, Rezkin takes Tyrion and Wesson to the Duke's estate, showcasing how he can walk through wards while Wesson makes sure that the alarm doesn't sound, and they all find a nasty slave dungeon where the people are basically zombies. Rezkin promises the Duke will pay for his crimes. Around this time, Pallas publicly declares that he wishes to court the beautiful Asaria, but she needs a guardian who will pay for her dowry and make political dealings for her with Pallas's family. Kai offers up Rezkin as a possible guardian, and in return she can be a part of his royal guard. Now, Kai is a slick one. This has been his plan all along, to get Asaria into the royal guard. Once he saw how great she was with the sword, he thought that she would be a perfect candidate. Later on in private, Asaria accepts this whole deal after Rezkin shows her his papers and Shaylin's, and she swears fealty to him then and there. Back at the tournament, Rezkin is wrecking his way through all of these contestants. His whole team places very highly in their respective tiers. They're not all in the same tier, but, many of them are in like tier 3 or higher. Now, there's 3 pretty significant battles that Rezkin faces here. A Gendishan slave trader kills his opponent, a nice young farm boy who the crowd loved. He fights with a staff, and everyone is appalled and wants justice for this murder in this tournament. Rezkin fights a mountain chieftain with a giant battle axe and wins, technically claiming his chieftain title if Rezkin wants it. Rezkin refuses the position, but the chieftain gives him the axe as a sign that he and his clan will follow Rezkin wherever he goes and basically be subservient to him. Rezkin then fights the Gendishan, and before the Sandman can even start, Rezkin completely disarms him, literally, and executes him. Rezkin says, "You have been judged and found guilty. Bring I to thee king's dark tidings." This is kind of seen as his first showing as a king, executing a man who had killed an innocent person. Around this time, Rezkin finally finds Farson on a rooftop with his niece, Mage Nancy Threll, who finds herself drawn to the Dark Warrior. Rezkin takes off his mask and shows Farson his proof of eligibility to the throne. Farson does not trust him, but is surprised to find out that Rez never got his final orders. He does not know that he is supposed to work for King Kaedian. In the final match of the tournament, Rezkin wins and is immediately accosted by 7 strikers. 2 of them, Shazar and Rourke, swear fealty to him after seeing his papers, but not before Rezkin quickly kills all of the other strikers. Afterwards, he says, 5 was not enough. 7 would not have been enough either. So all of the city guards are in an uproar and killing people and capturing people, and King Kaedian is kind of making his move, and this is the kind of inciting event for the rest of the series, where Ashai is now in turmoil. And in the flight from Scutton, everybody decides to stay with Dark Tidings. And in the flight from Scutton, everyone decides to stay with Dark Tidings. Rezkin has not unmasked himself yet, and they flee to the Duke's estate, where Kai has procured a ship on the other side of the slave dungeon. Asaria beheads the Duke, as he is the one who actually ordered her father's death. And as they arrive at the ship, an overwhelming amount of soldiers pour into the underground cavern, and Rezkin tries to hold them off. Pallas and Asaria fight beside him, but a crossbow is aimed at her head. Pallas jumps on top of her, making them nearly miss the bolt, but on the way down, Pallas is stabbed in the heart and dies. They get to the ship, but everyone is more than distraught over the death of Pallas. Rezkin learns from the strikers that back in Ashai, many of the heads of noble houses have been captured or killed, with the General Markham, and a couple others having escaped. Frisha wants to know where Rezkin is, and Dark Tidings removes his helmet. Rezkin hangs his head as they all mourn Pallas and deal with the truth of who Rezkin is. Book 3, Legends of On. Rezkin heads to Chenaria to mess with some legal documents allowing their boat to dock. On the way, he is accosted by Bilior, the most annoying winner of the Groot look-alike contest. He is a fey creature that promises Rezkin safety on the Isle of Kylerum in return for a human army, or so Rezkin believes is the deal. Also, the type of being that Bilior is known as a Catergan, and yeah, he basically looks like Groot, and he can also take other shapes. When Rezkin first runs into him, Rezkin kind of leaves the boat, and he's going through the wilderness to get to whatever city in Chenaria he was going to, and on the way he basically runs into Wesson, and he's like, Wesson, what, I told you to stay on the ship, like, you don't usually defy my orders, why are you here? And Bilior as Wesson, like kind of illusioned as Wesson, kind of plays it up for a while, and then eventually Rezkin is like, all right, who are you? I know you're not Wesson. And that's how we meet Bilior. Quick update on Frisha. She is still mad at Rezkin. So, once in Chenaria, Rezkin pretends to be a lowly vagabond and ingratiates himself with the local prostitutes, which sounds like my typical Friday night. Using the brothel as a place to fall back to and to sleep, he then goes out and convinces the council members to vote positively on a deal that King Ionius of Chenaria will make with Dark Tidings, giving him the Isle of Kyle. Along the way, he runs into one of the Idana Ro, who have been looking for the Raven, believing him to be the same person as Dark Tidings. Clever little ladies, they know that he's the same person. He basically tells her he does not see them as enemies and would prefer it to stay that way. Now, the Idana Ro, we find out more about them later, but they're basically another assassin guild. And that's all I'll say for now, because they do come back in a big way. And if you haven't gotten there yet, then I don't want to spoil it. Rezkin's planned final stop is at King Ionius's castle. He needs to convince him to propose the deal with Dark Tidings in the first place. Along the way, he uncovers a plot to kill the king's daughter and saves her from a poisoning by making her nursemaid drink the poison instead, with mostly horrific side effects. The Raven tells her he will come back for her and she will join their voyage. Now, it's important to note here that King Ionius is the one who basically was about to poison his own daughter. He wanted to get her out of the way, and this was his way of doing that. After this, Rezkin heads for the king's chamber, only to find an irate King Ionius and the assassin Zha Zhangri, who attacks Rezkin but gives up the fight to declare him the Rail Shang, basically pronouncing him his god. It's a very cult-like following. Rezkin tells Ionius that he must give Dark Tidings his daughter and Kylerum. Now, Rezkin already has King Ionius' daughter, so he's basically just putting a bow on this whole deal, saying, you will give me your daughter and you will, give me the Isle of Kyle. Rezkin takes Ilinet to the brothel. If I haven't mentioned this yet, Ilinet is the daughter. He takes her to the brothel to have her somewhere safe while he does Rezkin things. Eventually, crime lord Brendis shows up at the brothel and causes a ruckus, and Rezkin has to kill him and his men, and decides to reintroduce himself to the prostitutes as the Raven, and thus creates a foothold in Chenaria for the Raven's illicit business ventures. Dark Tidings meets with King Ionius, who gives his consent for the Ashians to inhabit Kyle, but Kyle is shared with Gendishin, and Rezkin must also get their consent as well. Some other stipulations are that Dark Tidings will take Princess Ilinet as his ward, not his wife, and that 2 priests of the Maker will accompany their pilgrimage to Kyle and keep an eye on Rezkin. It feels like this could have been a bigger plot point, but it rarely comes up again. The priests, I mean, the priests do not play a major role other than just kind of hanging around. Quick romance update. Illinet and Tam are adorable and have lots of flirty scenes. And then Frisha stops being blind but is still irritating. Iseria is heartbroken, and Rez finds true love in a cat? They arrive in Kyle by having Rezkin push through the Ielvenon ward around the island and by sailing straight into the seawall, which is actually overlapping cliffs, creating a watery channel that they can sail their boat through. Rezkin touches a door to the city and he basically dies when the city's ancient magic touches his life force, but he survives it because he's Rezkin and he has plot armor. When he comes back to himself, he has an acute paranoia, and the book doesn't really explain what's going on here until a couple books later, so we will get to that. They explore the city and find the Shielrea, basically ancient Ielvenon ghosts, who have stayed behind to serve the city and the Sieclia, aka Rezkin. Again, we'll learn what all this really means in a couple books from now, but basically, just as the assassins see Rezkin as the real Gesh, the Ielvenon see him as the Sieclia. And there's a reason why all of these different groups of people are reacting to Rezkin in this way. Notice that Kai immediately sees the need to kind of kneel to Rezkin and declare him his king, not to mention all the other people that are doing it as well. But then you have the assassins that are declaring him the real Gesh. You have the thieves guilds that are all bowing to him. And then you have the Shielrea, which are declaring him the Sieclia, which is basically their leader, their person that they follow. So there's a reason why all of these things are happening. It's not just that Rezkin is the main character and so everybody kind of like follows him. I mean, in a sense, that is why, I guess, because it's a book and that's kind of how the plot goes. But there is like a narrative reason why all this is happening. Back in Ashai, we see the Thieves Guild is breaking out the Jubai family as well as other nobility and the mages. We also see that the Assassins Guild is working together with the Thieves Guild in doing this, which is really cool. They take the prior captives to the fortress where General Markham now resides with a bunch of other nobles. Iseria and many others are taken from the larger group, and Rezkin finds out that they're being used in a magical sacrifice, a ritual, and he learns how to disrupt this ritual. However, this will include putting part of the hostages' souls into crystals from the city, and maybe that's something I haven't explained yet, but in this city of Kylerum, there's all these little crystals, or like big crystals and stuff, and they have some sort of magical property that nobody really understands, but Rezkin is able to use them. He's the only one that can activate these crystals. And so in order to save these hostages, really the only person that we care about is Iseria. When he saves her from the ritual, he has to bind her soul to one of these crystals. Now, while all of this is going on, Frisha and Tyrion fight a demon-possessed priest of the Maker with Bilior's help. They don't know it's Bilior, but Bilior is there. Tyrion also does a really cool life spell where he like throws these seeds and he forces them to grow extremely fast in midair, creating like this big plant wall. Really cool. Bilior helps by becoming this giant snake and eats the priest. And it's really, really satisfying. And then back with Rezkin, he is successful in getting most of the hostages back, including Iseria, but he has to task Malseus with holding on to her lifestone and staying near her. Malseus doesn't want to, but he ultimately realizes that he will do what Rezkin asks of him. Issaria can't hold on to her own life stone because the mages aren't really sure what would happen if you are physically able to hold your own soul in your hand. And so it needs to be somebody else, and it needs to be somebody that has some kind of bond with her. And as angry as Malseus is with Issaria, he blames her for Pallas's death and all this stuff. They do share a bond through Pallas. And even if that bond is one of hatred, it will strengthen the crystal and keep her safe. But Malseus has to kind of stay by her side. He has to stay, like, they can't go to opposite ends of the world. He has to stay in pretty close proximity with her. And so this is a big burden that Malseus is taking on. This is a serious commitment, and we will definitely see that play out over the next few books. Farson arrives in Kyle looking for his niece. He really only wants to take her away. He pulls off this big deception in order to get into Kyle, but Rezkin sees him right away. He immediately knows it's Farson, and everybody is there as Farson comes in on this ship, and Rezkin basically publicly calls out Nancy Threll, who's like behind him, who's behind Rezkin. And he's like, you can either go or stay. Like, you're not a hostage here. And she wants to be there, but Farson thinks that Rezkin has taken her hostage in order to get Farson there. But that's not what's happening at all. And Rezkin's like, I'm trying to make you see that. Like, I'm not holding anybody hostage. He's like, you can even come in and stay in the city with your niece if you want, but you're not going to take anybody away against their will. Like, if Nancy Threll didn't want to leave, which she doesn't, and Farson was going to make her leave or spirit her away, Rezkin's like, no, you can't do that. Like, anybody who wants to be here can be here. So ultimately, Threll decides to stay and promises to keep an eye on Farson, her uncle. And last but not least, Frisha is still upset with Rezkin and is clearly reconsidering their betrothal. The book ends with Tam asking Rezkin what's wrong with her, to which Rezkin replies, nothing is wrong with her. I am the one who does not belong. And it's a very sad and melancholy ending. We all just want Rezkin to feel like he belongs with the people of the Outworld, but he is so different and so alone, or at least that's what he believes to be true. I don't know if not everybody believes that. They're like, you can be whatever you want to be, Rezkin. You don't have to be this isolated and person who is apart from everyone else. But that's what's going on in Rezkin's head, and that is how the third book ends. Book 4, Kingdoms and K-pop. Oh, it is Kingdoms and Chaos. I definitely need to rewrite this entire recap. Okay, after reading the correct book, I can definitely tell you that Rezkin, the Strikers, and a few of the nobles and Wesson make their way through Gendishin. Wesson has a personal beef with the Purifiers of Gendishin because they want to kill him. And anyone like him. They run into a mercenary crew, and Rezkin tells a story of when he was younger at the fortress. He took control of a military operation for men serving time in prison, mostly bad people. He used them to his advantage for a mission, then killed them all, but didn't kill those who joined later, so there's that. With this, we learn that Rezkin was not always at the fortress when he was growing up, but it still stays true to the fact that he was never in the big cities or the towns or anything. This was a special mission that he got sent on that didn't have anything to do with the normal people of the Outworld. Rezkin's constant paranoia is not present when outside the Citadel. Take a note of that. We get an encounter with Droglix, which are basically lizard people. I'm looking at you, Argonians from Skyrim. I'm looking at you, lusty Argonian from Skyrim. I had a big spoiler in my notes, and I can't say that. The purifiers are mages, likely all readers, which is cool because it had been hinted at in book 2 that readers are extremely rare, and now we know why. Gendishin is gathering all of them up to be their purifiers. They basically kidnap these readers or blackmail them or find a way to make them not loyal to Gendishin, but in their country and unable to leave and to work for them. Rezkin tells Wesson that he is the king's mage. Wesson is the king's mage, not that Rezkin is the king's mage. You get it. Wesson says, I am not cut out for this, Rezkin. And Rezkin says, you are exactly the kind of person the king's mage should be. Now Wesson has to decide what is to be done with the purifiers. He chooses to freeze them in place like stone, hoping that the spell would degrade and that they'd be free to go once Rezkin and company have left. It does not go to plan. Rezkin tells them to strike a daring pose, and they sure do, before getting turned into stone forever. The crew meets King Privith and reader Kessa. Kessa has basically been captured and held hostage there to be a reader for Privith. She reads Rezkin and says that he's very cold and definitely not a mage, maybe something else, or maybe a spell lays over him, which is what Wesson said in the second book. She says that no one can force Wesson to do anything that he doesn't want to do, and if Rezkin has garnered the loyalty of Wesson, then he must be very powerful indeed. Privith wants the Sword of Irie, and it's the only thing that he'll trade Kylerim for. There's a whole prophecy that lays over this sword. The kings believe that every king has the opportunity to be this great warrior from this prophecy. Honestly, it's not a huge deal. It doesn't really come up later, but it is a way that Rezkin kind of proves that he's worthy of kingdoms. I'll say that. At the end of this book, basically, he takes the Sword of Irie and he plants it in the throne, and it lights on fire. We'll talk about it more in a minute. But it does kind of fulfill the prophecy in their eyes, as if Rezkin was the fulfillment of that prophecy, if that makes any sense. As they regroup in the cabin, the strikers smuggle in Tam, who has been on assignment in Uthril, but wants to go adventuring with Rezkin. Rezkin tells him that he's needed in Uthril and that he cannot go to the Idana Row with him. They protect the Row, or innocents, from people who have walked a darker path like Rezkin. Sometimes this means killing the Row, or the innocents, before they can lose their innocence. Which is kind of dumb, because Rezkin ultimately takes Malseus, who would probably also be considered Row. Back at Kyle, the mountain men are training everyone to become warriors, and the life mages have begun a project to make alcoholic fruit. This could be a very good export from Kyle. Now, Tyrion and Frisha are starting to become very friendly with each other, and they're talking about relationships in general, and Tyrion, talks about how the nobles have this responsibility to their house and how they can't date commoners. And Frisha says, but we're not in a shy. Rezkin makes the rules here, and Rezkin wants us to be happy. And for the first time, people are really considering that this new kingdom thing could work out, and that the rules may be different than a shy. Maybe there will be no hierarchy as they knew it. Tyrion and Frisha go for a walk, and she expresses doubts about wanting to marry Rezkin. She does not believe that he honestly loves her. Tyrion says they're not guaranteed love, and that's when she says that quote earlier, as he's like, nobles aren't guaranteed love, and she's like, but we're not in a shy. Like, we can choose who we want to marry. We don't have to be beholden to this old way of thinking from original Ashai. Tyrion tells her that he has a duty to the Wellington line, and she has her own duties, and that they'll need to be responsible for them again when things get back to normal. Frisha says, we stand here in a magical kingdom across the sea while a war rages in Ashai. Do you really think anything will ever go back to normal? Meanwhile, Rezkin is attacked by someone throwing a dagger, but they vanish. Assyria is knighted, promoted to Knight of the Realm, and then a lot of stuff is revealed in chapters 5 and 6 and is extremely important, but I'll try to keep it as streamlined as I possibly can. Basically, there is this guy named Conovan, who is the one that threw the dagger earlier. He shows up on the island and accosts Rezkin, trying to get him to fight him, but Rezkin needs information from him. They set up a time for Conovan to come meet him in the royal office with the lady that he brought with him. Conovan turns out to be the real Rez, the actual Shadow Knight, the actual king's assassin, the one prior to Rezkin. Rezkin is now understood to be a title, not a name. Rezkin was never given a true name and has only ever gone by Rezkin. It was supposed to change to just Rez when he completed his training, part of which included killing the previous Rez, aka Conovan. Matter of fact, Farson starts calling him Rez as he gets older, and he assumed that Rezkin knew all this, but Rezkin has no idea about any of this because he was never even given the final 2 rules, so he's actually in the dark about all of this Dark Tidings, King's Dark Tidings, like Shadow Knight business. The lady turns out to be Rezkin's mother, Queen Lucilia, wife of King Bordrin. Rezkin is a true Prince of Ashai, not a bastard. Conovan also reveals that Rezkin is a scrivener, able to remember anything he sees, reads, or does with perfect recall, as is his mother, Queen Lucilia. This explains how Rezkin was able to learn so much in such a short period of time, and why he was able to master all the skills and then some. We learn that Rezkin's trainers, Jayardun and Pater, were Sengoka, elite warrior necromancers. Rezkin had died and been revived many times. They make tattoos on the skin of the one being revived, noting the time and place of death, the manner of death, and the time of retrieval. Rezkin has marks covering his entire body, but has been trained to use a passive illusion spell which makes them invisible. There was a third master named Berengish who was ordered to go train Cadian. They showed up, the 3 Sengoka, arrived in Ashai, saying that they had been sent by a knight of Mikael to train Rezkin. Bordrin agreed, but only if Berengish trained Cadian. Pater and Jayardun told Conovan that Berengish had only joined them after they received word from the knight of Mikael, which is really kind of interesting. That was something I noticed on this reread that I hadn't picked up before. Bordrin had also thought of making Tyrion the next Rez, which just would have been really funny. So, Cadian sent Conovan away on a pointless mission when he gave the order to kill Rezkin. Remember back in book 1 when he was tasked to kill the strikers? Yeah, that came down from Cadian. He had been under the assumption that Rez still had years to go on his training and had no idea that Rezkin was already well ahead of his planned completion date, thinking that the strikers would be more than enough to kill Rezkin. It's likely the Sen Masters killed each other knowing that Rezkin would succeed and that they would not want to be under the thumb of Cadian when Rezkin was freed, or that if they didn't, they would have to follow Cadian's order to kill Rezkin themselves, which they would have not wanted to do because Rezkin would also probably win against them as well. We also learn that the secret job of the Rez is to kill a king if he oversteps or becomes a mad tyrant. This will make even more sense in Book 5. Conovan could never put together enough evidence to show that Cadian was mad, and there were rumors that he had killed Bordrin, but he couldn't find anything concrete. Cadian is still not sure what happened to Rezkin and most likely thinks that he died. Rezkin killed everyone at the fortress, so there was no one to report back to him, and the fortress is warded or enchanted, not allowing anyone to find it except Markham, who is led there by Conovan, because Conovan knows where the fortress is. The wards are likely somehow powered by Rezkin himself, even though he has no idea how that would be the case. Also, Bordrin's standing orders with Conovan were to protect Lucilia and Thressen before any other duty, even before his Rez duties. Also, Markham contacted Conovan because he feared Rezkin was in fact the next Rez, but doesn't know what the Rez's true purpose is. Lucilia was held at the castle against her will with no one to help her. It was only after Conovan entered into a gray area regarding his duty to the king that he was able to help her. Rezkin tells them that they will be under intense supervision by the Shielrea and are not allowed to leave the citadel at all. Otherwise, besides not being able to leave, they're able to live there like any other person. So, something I didn't mention is that in this scene with Conovan, there are many other people in the room. There's Isaria, Tyrion, Malseus, Tam, I think, Frisha, Farson, Kai. Basically, the whole main cast is in this room. He brought everybody together because he wanted them all to know who he really is, because he knew to some extent that he would get some big answers from Conovan, and so he brought together all the people that are his capital F friends into this room. Now, on the way out, Frisha's walking with Queen Lucilia, and she's having a bit of a panic attack. Frisha is. She's basically freaking out about the fact that she has been dating the Rez. Like, she's been courting this man who is one of the most feared people in all of the kingdoms. And Lucilia tells her, there was no reason for you to be in that room. He wanted you there to bear witness, to hear it from the source. He wanted you to know who he is. The Rez does not part with that information lightly. Anyone in that room is someone he trusts, someone for whom he cares. Next up, Rezkin heads for the Adana Row. Frisha sneaks aboard with help from Za, who warded a trunk with her in it, and Ilanet had cast an illusion over the contents of the trunk to appear as animals, but it's sloppy. Rezkin is able to pull the ward aside like a curtain and move past it to allow Wesson to undo the illusion, revealing Frisha. Now, a gigantic fight breaks out. Rezkin is very upset at Za for doing this to Frisha. He explains to Frisha that if she had asked, he would have informed her of the danger, and if she still wanted to go, then he would have let her. However, he decides to kill Za until Frisha speaks up for him and says that he is innocent, to which Rezkin laughs. Before Rezkin can kill him, Za declares Doriel Und for Frisha, meaning that he is bonded to her as her protector forever. If she dies, then he also dies. During this time, it is revealed that Rezkin is the Raven to a few people, to Frisha, to Farson, and to Wesson mostly. Farson asks Rezkin why he took over the criminal underworld, and Rezkin says that he needed a spy network to find Farson, among other things. Rezkin says that he is the best unifying force for the kingdom against the tyrant Cadian, to which Farson reluctantly agrees, marking a turning point for Farson. I love this quote from Wesson where he says, "Oh, you are the Raven? Everything makes so much sense now." Frisha asks Wesson why he is not disturbed by this latest revelation, and Wesson tells her that everyone believes him to be something different. Farson knows him as the Rez. Za knows him as the Rael Gesh. Others see him as a king, but Wesson says, "I never presumed to know him," to which Frisha says, "You weren't supposed to marry him." Back to Wesson, "Neither were you. Your guardian rejected the match. Now, perhaps, you know why." Rezkin pulls Wesson aside and says, "Mage, you do not have a problem with this?" Wesson says, "No, I have many problems with it. Like I said, I never presumed to know you. The fact remains that your father, King Bordrin, had trained you to be this way for a reason. My father said that Bordrin was a stern man, not kind, but a good king that deserved our respect. I've watched you, and I believe you to be the same. My father believed in Bordrin, and I believe in you." And in my opinion, that is one of the best lines of the entire series, and I think perfectly sums up how people are supposed to view Rezkin, like this undying faith in their leader. And it's just amazing the faith that Wesson puts into Rezkin, and he holds him accountable at the same time, but he also has so much trust that Rezkin will see them through. So they arrive at the Adana Row, who make Rezkin get naked and climb a mountain. As he does so, he exits this ward that they had constructed, and briefly everyone can see his runic tattoos covering every inch of his body, which means that he must have died many, many, many times. While climbing the mountain, he runs out of footholds and uses a potential ward to create a very small explosion within the rock and make a foothold. When he gets inside, he uses another one on the leader of the Idana Rho to mark her body with their creed, a reminder to serve the will of the gods. She tasks him with acquiring the Queen of Lon-the-Resh's daughter willingly and bringing her back to the Idana Rho for training. He also steals her necklace and gives it to Iseria later, which is a big statement to the Lareshi people, showing that he has not necessarily like claimed this woman, but that she has accepted this gigantic gift from Rezkin, and that means something to them, especially because I believe the necklace is from Lon-the-Resh. It was like the Queen's necklace originally, and then the Idana Rho took it, something to that effect. But it's a big statement to them, and shows that Iseria, this powerful Lareshi woman, has basically given up her rights to her king. Like she follows her king. He claims her in a way. It's a power move. That's what it is. It's a power move. The Idana Rho also steal Frisha for a minute and offer her a role in the order, to which Rezkin says absolutely not. They arrive in Lon-the-Resh and we meet Queen Arisiel, who plans to claim Rezkin, and Selyse, who is being accosted by a man in the hallway. Rezkin kills him and acts as Selyse's champion during the trial later that night, when the man's Maitreya accused Selyse of killing him herself. Rezkin exposes a consort for cheating on his Maitreya and shows an extremely adept understanding of Lareshi political maneuvering and very good observation skills. Rezkin offers that Iseria act as champion for the house that this consort has offended, and she asks, what if he's better? He is not, Rezkin says. Iseria wipes the floor with him, and doing this means Iseria is showcased in front of Lareshi nobility and moved up a tier politically speaking, and Rezkin gains a powerful trade ally and boosts Arisiel's position and making her more likely to transfer Oladia to the Idana Rho. Arisiel claims Rezkin as husband, and then a Matrianera offers her brother Koledon as her champion to refute the queen's claim, but Rezkin would be acting as champion, so Koledon would die. He curses his sister and prepares for a fight, but Rezkin offers him sanctuary in Kyle if he swears fealty. He accepts on the spot, and Rezkin is claimed and married. In one of the most absolutely satisfying scenes of the book, Selyse claims Wesson, and Koledon acts as her champion. She believes Wesson is cute, like a puppy, against Arisiel's wishes. Wesson is claimed, and Rezkin laughs genuinely for what may be the first time. Back in Arisiel's chamber, she frets about her daughter claiming a failed mage, and Rezkin says, your daughter chose the most dangerous man in that room, besides me, of course. It's true that he failed as a life mage. That is because he is a natural-born battle mage with an affinity for notioned and destructive magic. He is 3 times more powerful than Sarunius, perhaps more. It was he who stood with me in front of King Priveth, fending off a dozen purifiers without so much as casting a spell. If you angered him, he could probably level this entire palace. So the wedding night happens. Wesson actually has to be there to like be a witness to it, which is really just strange and awkward, I'm sure. And then the next morning, Selyse goes on the voyage with everyone, and Oladia is taken to the Idana Rho, who we find out do not actually have the sword. King Moldovan of Farel has it. He hates the Idana Rho, but he uses their services occasionally when it suits him. On the way to Farel, they are accosted by a water monster with huge tentacles. There are 2 ships in the distance. Rezkin is sure that one of them has a demon on board. Rezkin is grabbed by the monster and taken under the water. Wesson then has to make a split-second decision. Does he stick to his boundaries and morals, or does he protect those he now cares about? He lets the manic dark energy into himself as a wild giggle rises in his chest, and he turns one of the ships into a fine mist, absolutely obliterating the ship and anyone on board. No one has ever seen anything like this, and it is incredible and absolutely horrible. He did get the correct ship. The demon is dead and the other ship surrenders. Meanwhile, the sea Nereids bring Rezkin back aboard and wash his Shaylin back onto the ship as well after he lost it in the fight. The sea Nereids are basically fae creatures, like water fae. We also find out that Isaria and Malseus fell into the sea and were swept to the shores of Lan Laresh, a huge turning point in their story. After walking for days, they end up at the camp of the 4th Echelon and Malseus is claimed. Isaria has to challenge her claim and win a complex battle scenario, and she gets many of the people on her side and overwhelms the Echelon leader and claims it for her own. After her win, she sees that the 3rd Echelon has double-crossed the 4th, and so she challenges the 3rd, who cannot produce a champion. She is now the leader of the 3rd and 4th Echelons, claiming them under House Palace. Also, it's important to note here, I don't know if I stressed it enough, in order for Isaria to challenge the claim of this other Matrionera who tried to claim Malseus, Isaria has to claim him, and he has to, or no, he did not accept her claim, but her claim goes through regardless. That was a strategic move on their part for him not to accept the claim. But, I mean, as far as Lan Laresh is concerned, he is claimed by Isaria. Rezkin finds King Moldovan, who will only give him the sword if he claims Pharrell for his empire and kills Bolas, the next in line for the throne. Rezkin does kill Bolas, who appears to be a demon, and Moldovan abdicates the throne. And after doing this, Moldovan basically kind of passes over a spell to Rezkin, kind of relinquishing it from himself, and it's a benediction of some kind, and now Rezkin magically has all the knowledge of the castle and sees where the sword is, among many other things. And then Rezkin decides that he doesn't want to be king of Pharrell and hands kingship over to Koladon because he's there. Even Moldovan says that his grandson passes around kingship like it is water. There's a great growing moment for Malseus right before the battle with Isaria and the Echelons and everything. And in his POV, he says, Pallas had lost his life to Isaria. He could not just let her walk into a battle and get killed. Why had he never considered that before? And this is such a great moment where he's starting to kind of come around on Isaria and realize that she meant so much to his brother. Why is he holding this over her head? Why is he treating her so poorly and not understanding that he can show love to his dead brother by showing, grace to Isaria as well. Somewhere in the midst of all this, Tam is taken as a slave and chained to another man called Uthe. There's kind of a whole storyline with them. It's not really important for it is important, but there's a lot of minor details that aren't important. But the main takeaway is that Tam is taken as a slave and he's chained to Uthe. Isaria and Malseus meet back up with Rezkin at a port, but Malseus tells of the claim magically scarring his face and Isaria's because you're not supposed to recognize the claim outside of Lan Laresh, and if you do so, the rest of the world considers you married, and now Isaria can't marry anybody else, and neither can Malseus. They now have a lot to work out because he's kind of changed their lives forever. Outside of Lan Laresh, they wouldn't have been considered anything, and they could go on their own separate ways. But now that Malseus has talked about this, the entire world is going to consider them married. Another one of my favorite scenes in the series is right here where Wesson is crouched over a broken pot, and he's kind of having a moment of crisis, realizing that he needs to be able to put things back together as well as destroy them. Rezkin takes the pieces of this pot and shows him that it can now be turned into something new and arranges it into a beautiful mosaic. And then he tells Wesson, maybe someday you can fix me. Wesson says, but you are perfect just the way you are. Oh, which of course was Rezkin's point the whole time. Sometimes people should just accept who they are and lean into that, because that's what makes people people, and that's what makes them beautiful and unique and different. And this is such an amazing analogy. I wish I could go beat by beat through the entire scene. I don't have time for that, but if you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. On the way to Gendishin at a camp at night, Rezkin accidentally stumbles across a pocket realm where Bilior and the other ancients meet him. They say there are demons nearby, and sometimes people can create these pocket realms. Bilior tells Rezkin that the Fey elementals are at his disposal. All he has to do is call. Back in Kyle, Tyrion basically tells Frisha that he wants to court her and wants to marry her, and she accepts, and they kiss and everything else, and she is terrified that Rezkin is going to be super, super upset when he gets back from his voyage, and Tyrion tells her, "I would face an army of elven wraiths to keep you at my side." What a great, just growing moment for Tyrion. And it's really interesting, if you go back and reread the series, there are multiple points of foreshadowing. This is what I love about Kelkate's writing, is there's multiple points of foreshadowing where it foreshadows Frisha getting together with Tyrion. You wouldn't think so on a first reread, but Rezkin mentions multiple times, if I can't court her, if I can't marry her because of these things that the general is doing to make it so that I can't marry her, maybe she would be better with someone like Tyrion, or a duke, or an heir to some kingdom, he even tells Tyrion in the second book, my whole point in making this voyage was to ingratiate Frisha with the nobility, so that if I can't marry her, she can marry someone like you, Tyrion. And there's so many little nudges in that direction, and I think this romance was pulled off so well. I didn't really think so my first read through, but as I read through many, many, many more times, I think it's masterfully done. I think it's really, really well done. Back in Gendishin, Privith reneges on the deal after acquiring the sword. A giant battle breaks out within the throne room, and then Rezkin wins and slams the sword into the throne, calling upon the fire elementals to imbue the sword, seemingly fulfilling the prophecy. As Reader Kessa dies, she gives Wesson a gold medallion, which is his full mage status, because remember, he had never, because he refused to embrace his destructive abilities, he was never able to make it to full mage status, so he was always a journeyman. And Reader Kessa gives him the medallion, basically saying, you are a full mage. You have earned the right to call yourself a full mage. And then she tells him that you can kill him, possibly implying that he would be able to win if he fought Rezkin, or maybe Kaedian. We'll come back to this in a moment, but Rezkin explains the Fey involvement to Wesson and Farson, who are shocked that he would do such a thing. Rezkin said they had been in dire straits and that he needed to protect his friends above all else. Rezkin explains the Fey involvement and the deal he made and everything to Wesson and Farson, who are shocked that he would do such a stupid thing. And Rezkin said that they had been in dire straits and he needed to protect his friends above all else in order to follow Rule 1. And I think this is the moment that Farson really starts to come around on Rezkin and realize this isn't a disguise that Rezkin is putting on. The fact that Rezkin actually made a deal with the Fae shows like basically concrete proof that his heart is in the right place, that, you know, he did it to protect his friends and all that stuff. But Farson is surprised to find out that Wesson has not sworn fealty to Rezkin. Rezkin says that he saw the need for a Rez long before he actually learned of him, and someday Wesson may be required to kill Rezkin. Although Wesson knows he may not succeed, he is the most likely to do it. During this time, Tyrion and Frisha have decided to court, like I said earlier, and Tyrion is terrified of the moment that Rezkin will notice. Rezkin, you know, comes back from his voyage and he walks into the courtyard and he sees them running around together and smiling and hugging and all this stuff. And as he walks up, they immediately go still and they're like, Rezkin, we need to talk to you. And Rezkin just says, happiness looks good on you, Frisha, and you, cousin. Tyrion tells Rezkin and Frisha of the missing Tam, who is last seen being taken to the Isle of Sand. Frisha screams at him to go get Tam, sending one of the strikers is not good enough. It must be Rezkin. You are his best friend, Rezkin. As he storms off, he is hit by a dart that puts him to sleep. Entris and Azaria talk from afar about the disposition of this Emperor of the Suelian. Who is Entris and Azaria, you ask? We will find out in Book 5. Book 5, Dragons and Demons. Well, that was fast. Just when they thought he would die, Rezkin awakes from his coma to find Tyrion standing over him, and Rez quickly turns him into folded laundry in his panic. To be clear, he wraps he wraps Tyrion in a bed sheet. Like, he wakes up and pulls his bed sheet off, wraps Tyrion in it, and ties a knot, and Kai has to go untie him. It's pretty funny. Rezkin has been asleep for a week, poisoned by a dart, and no one knows who did it. Upon his waking, he learns that there are two Brants, Brant Jubai, they're two of them, identical copies of each other. We find out that a Fey creature had taken his form and copied him exactly down to the DNA and memories of the original Brant, and now no one can tell them apart. They don't even know which one of them is the original one, so everybody just labels them red and blue. Wesson puts a little blue lightning bolt and a red lightning bolt on either of their hands. Rezkin actually says that they might make like a really impactful team, because obviously they're like the same person, and so their fighting style is the exact same, and they could make a really fearsome duo, and I'm so excited to see what Kelkay does with this. Quick political update, Jiria is now officially at war with Cheneria, who is enduring internal unrest between factions and is kind of like having a civil war within itself while having a war with Jiria, and I can only imagine what a mess that is. I forget the context for this exactly, but I wrote down here these quotes between Rezkin and Tyrion that I really liked, where Rezkin says, you are not bound by the rules, Tyrion, go and be happy. And Tyrion says, you know, Rezkin, you are not bound by the rules either. You deserve happiness too. And this will play a big part in Book 6. The mages want Wesson to be raised to full mage since he is the Archmage, the King's Mage. Their chain of command will not allow the other mages to do it, which is mostly just a funny plot device to get Wesson to go to Ashai later in the book. It's a little plot convenient, but I'll allow it. Rezkin must take Mage Threll with him to go get Tam, since Raylan is still an apprentice and will need guidance. The council from Pharrell comes to Kyle to crown Rezkin king before he conquers them. Basically, they say, we know that you're planning on conquering us eventually, so we might as well just show up here and hand you the crown. And Rezkin's like, I had no intention of coming to claim their kingdom. And they're like, yeah, but just in case you do, we're just going to make you king anyways. And so Rezkin goes to sign the treaty. I don't know what you would call it, his kingship, and one of the members of this council tries to stab Rezkin, who blocks the attack and then kills him with the quill in his hand, and then signs the contract with the man's blood. It's the most badass thing ever. Such a cool way to become king. And then Rezkin gives Gendishin to Baron Drom Nask. Rezkin has also created a cell phone, mage relay. Matter in fact, he made multiple of them. There's 6 of them, and they work like extremely long range walkie-talkies. They all have like a 1 through 6 basically that can get you in contact with the other mage, like small mage relays that everybody else has. And basically each group that ventures out has one. And he also makes sure that Caledon and Nask both have one. And I think that possibly, there's a lot of groundwork laid for this in the series, so I don't think it came out of nowhere, but it is kind of plot convenient for Kelcade to be able to just make them communicate faster now that everybody is kind of going in different directions. There had to be a way for everybody to communicate, so I get it, but it's a little funny. It's a little funny. At their first stop at an inn, Rezkin and the group that are heading out, are accosted by the Aelvanon, Entris and Azaria, the ones who hit him with the blow dart. And they take Rezkin and Threll to their land past the Drogfear Mountains. Now, if you don't remember, the Aelvanon are what the Citadel is. That's an Aelvanon fortress, and they're the elves of ancient times, and they've been hidden away from humanity because humanity started hunting them and all sorts of stuff. And so they just decided to go live in reclusivity. But Entris and Azaria found out about Rezkin and all the crazy things he's doing, and so they came to investigate and to find out what he's doing. We also learned that Azaria can open interdimensional portals to other places, basically fast travel. It works exactly like fast travel, where she can open a portal to anywhere she's physically been before. So anybody that's played Skyrim knows exactly what I'm talking about. Rez is put on trial. Turns out he is a Spiritua, part human, part elf, and human Spiritua usually go mad around puberty, and so they're all there kind of trying to figure out if Rezkin has already gone mad, or if he's going mad, or if he hasn't gone mad, then why hasn't he gone mad? And so that's what they're all doing here. Entris tells Rezkin about the beginning of the universe, and honestly, I'm not smart enough to explain it all, but basically there's 3 gods. There's Mikael, Reyna, and Nicole. Mikael represents time, and Reyna represents space. Reyna created matter like earth and stars. Mikael created souls. These 2 things together created memory, which is Nicole, a separate god from both of them. Mikael and Reyna created the Fae. Reyna and Nicole worked together and accidentally made demons. So they created Hikajnak, which is basically their hell, to house the demons, and then all 3 work together to create plants and animals and humans. And then their first creation was a very early and ancient version of a raven, and kind of became the image of Mikael, which is funny because Rezkin's whole thing is raven. Fae and humans ended up breeding together, which created the dwarves, giants, and Aelvanon, and then humans and Aelvanon bred, and then that made human mages. So there's your history of the world. Entris explains what's been going on with Rezkin's paranoia and the weird calming effect of the Citadel. Basically, Rezkin, as a Spiritua, has unlimited access to a giant well of Vimara, the mana that they use to cast their spells. However, the more Vimara that he intakes and uses, the more madness affects him, and that's why he gets paranoid at certain times in the Citadel, is because if you go back and look at those times, he's actually using Vimara. The crystals in the Citadel siphon power from him to power the Citadel, but he has been trained by the Sen to not intake any Vimara, and like they train him to like not eat enough and to not sleep enough and many other things. And if he were to siphon power to Kyle, then he would feel a nice calming effect, which we've seen a couple times, except that he keeps wearing the amulet, which is constantly siphoning its own Vimara from him, and it keeps him from going mad, which is a good side effect. So you got all that? Rezkin tells them about the daemons and about Bilior leading him to Kyle. Entrus scolds him for making a deal with the Fae, but also tells him that he misunderstood the deal. Bilior wants an Ielvenon army and led Rez to Kyle, knowing that it would provoke the Ielvenon to come out of hiding once they saw that he had bonded with the Citadel. Also, the Sieclia, the leader of this whole place of elves, says that he used to know the most recent Knight of Mikael and her, but we don't know who she is. So that's like a whole nother mystery that's been just sat right in our lap. Za has to go to Chenaria, and he must take Frisha with him. This becomes just a massive issue, so we'll get to that in a bit. But the Ielvenon, we find out that they use emotions to cast their spells, although they do not use spells as the humans do. It just flows naturally from them through thought and emotion. Another thing the Sen had Rezkin repress is his emotions to keep him from creating too much of Amara within himself, thus stopping him from going mad. We also learn that Daemon and Ontep bred to make dragons, which is what's in Rezkin's amulet. It's a dragon egg, and his Vimara has been feeding it. Here's a big thing here is we find out that humans are often very drawn to Spiritua, inspiring loyalty and trust. What has happened the entire series up to this point? Remember, I mentioned this earlier in this video, that there's a reason why all of these people are following Rezkin and are so inclined to give him their loyalty and everything. It's because of this. It's because of his spiritual nature that they just have a one-up on humans are naturally drawn to them, and that's kind of what's going on with all that. Also, Trouble in Paradise, Azaria consistently resists Entrus's advances. I get the feeling that they've kind of been promised to each other for a long time, but she doesn't want to continue with this kind of arranged marriage thing that they have going on. So that's a whole nother plot thing. The Sieclia allows Rezkin to continue his mission with the aid of Entrus and Azaria, but after it is complete, after Ashai is safe and he has cemented a kingdom for his friends, he must come back to the Firth Adwin and remain there the rest of his life. And the Firth Adwin is where all the elves are. But he must remain there the rest of his life. That means after this mission, he cannot go back to Kyle. He has to come back here, which is terrifying. They meet back up with the crew and loosely fill them in, and then they split up and they take the ways. They encounter a giant dragon for the first time, which is really cool. And then on the other side of the world, Tam is offered help by the rock fae creatures in this kind of like prison place. He's a slave in a quarry, like mining rock. And then he's offered help by the rock fae creature, and he organizes this whole breakout. Rezkin and Azaria find a dragon held in captivity by people trying to summon demons and put demons into the dragon. And this is kind of the first time that we get the idea that you can put a demon into something, and that'll come back in a big way later. Rezkin makes his way into the quarry and finds Tam. He heals Tam's wound in his mind and breaks Tam and Uthe's shackles. Uthe is dumbfounded because Uthe was like kind of disregarding everything Tam was saying about, there's this place called Kyle and we all lived there and I was the king's best friend. And Uthe's like, you're crazy, you have a tumor in your brain. And then Rezkin actually shows up and everything's real. And also when Rezkin does this, when he taps into his emotions and uses his Vimara, he feels the paranoia start to creep in. And so we're seeing this kind of take shape as far as like, we got an answer to why this is happening, and now we're seeing it with greater context, and it's way scarier than it was before because Rezkin could literally like permanently go mad like Kadian is because of his use of Vimara. So does he use Vimara to save his friends? It's one more weapon at his disposal, or does he completely not use it at all and try to get by some other way so that he doesn't go mad? And that's kind of the whole conflict here with Rezkin. Rezkin then tasks Tam with helping Baron Nask run Gendishin, Tam having purview over the army and training his new soldiers, which, let's be real, Tam is not ready for that in any way, shape, or form. But Rezkin knights him as a sword bearer and gives him Kingslayer, which is a big, big move, and I'm really interested to see what comes of this. So Wesson goes and visits Ashai, which is just a great idea. And he's trying to get the mages onto his side, but they reject him and fill him with doubts toward Rezkin. There's a really great scene between him and the leader of the Mages Guild, and she's kind of like messing with Wesson's perception of Rezkin and making Wesson like really doubt everything that's happened over the past few months. It's really interesting. But Berengish shows up and attacks the academy, and then Wesson escapes and gets back to the Strikers, and then he heads for his hometown. There's lots of little nods to Mage of No Renown during these scenes and future ones. But honestly, I don't believe they have much bearing on the overall story. You should read Mage of No Renown, and if you want me to do a recap of that, I totally will. But I think a lot of the things from that book will probably be answered in this recap here. Also, Rezkin continues to have dreams of Azaria, and in these dreams, she is very forward, and she obviously cares for him a great deal more than what she shows during the waking hours. Okay, so Rezkin, Tam, and his men, Entris and Azaria and Mage Threll, arrive in Pruar, which is the land of the black-skinned shapeshifters. There's not too much here that has far-reaching consequences for the series, or at least not yet, so I'll try to keep it brief. There are many different tribes that all shift into different animals. They don't control what animal they turn into, and none of them cohabitate. Like the lions don't cohabitate with the leopards and jaguars or whatever. Like all the different animal shifters live in different places. These Pruari people are descended from Ielvenon. The shapeshifters do not have mage powers, but they do have the cold power that the elves have. There's an ancient Ielvenon somewhere in the Sahara that may be able to teach Rezkin how to not go mad. Also, the Pruari people use the Parabata leaves like it's going out of style, but they don't have to worry about addiction because the shape-shifting kind of burns all of the Parabata away inside them. So like they use the Parabata, but it just replenishes their ability to shapeshift. They find the Ielvenon who has been killing both the leopards and lion shapeshifters to cause a rift between the tribes. He tells Rezkin that he has the insight within himself to avoid going mad. He tells Rezkin that he has the insight within himself to avoid going mad. Basically, we don't get an answer here. He just tells Rezkin that the answer is inside you and that you need to figure out how to not go mad, but there is a way to do it. So Kelcade has kind of left herself a little window here to find a way around the whole going mad thing. He is arrested. The old Ielvanon who's been doing this. He's arrested and taken by Azaria to go before the council in Firth Adwin for what he's done. Then Aisei, one of the shapeshifter women, bonds with Rezkin after he tries to bring her back from the brink of death. Much to everyone's dismay, Rezkin has no idea he's doing this. He's just trying to heal her, and she ends up becoming a permanent fixture of his retinue, and she is magically bonded to him, much in the same way that like a claiming would happen. Or something like that. There is a magical bond there. Back in Ashai, Wesson arrives at his mom's house. She is married to a rebel, we find out, who contacts the leader of the rebels so that he can meet with them. And then we also find out that this is a Duvos. This is Raylan's dad. Wesson goes before the town to try to convince them to join the true king's side. His childhood mentor, Master Equestrius, speaks up on his behalf, attesting to his power as a destruction mage and his strength of character. During this time, he is confronted by a number of people from his past, including the father of the boy that he killed when he first came into his power, and after finally being able to plead his case, he is forgiven. Dia, his love that got away, that he was so in book 4 when he was in front of Erisiel and Selyse is trying to claim him, and he's like, no, I have this woman back home that I wish to marry. Well, he shows up in his hometown and finds out that she is married and she has kids. She never got his letters. He was sending her letters all through his youth, because something happened when he was young where he accidentally killed somebody, and a sheep, when he first came into his powers, and so he was kind of taken away and trained by Master Equestrius, and he's sending letters every week to Dia, and she believes that her father probably intercepted the letters and did not let her have them. Otherwise, she would have known that Wesson was in love with her and probably would have waited for him. But now she's married and she has kids, and she has a good family that Wesson doesn't want to disrupt. And so he is finally able to move on, and he officially belongs to Selyse now and kind of allows her into his life, which I don't think is a great message from, just like a writing perspective. Like, I get it, but I mean, Selyse is literally second best. Like, he literally was going after Dea, and then he accepts Selyse, and he's like, oh my god, I never noticed like how pretty she was and how amazing she is and all this stuff. But she's literally second choice. So I don't know. I don't mean to go on a rant about that, but I've always thought that was a little bit weird. Rezkin arrives at Wesson's house and meets the rebel leader, who does not immediately bow to him, but is overcome with emotion when he sees Raylan. They had a rift between them, and she wanted to like prove herself as a warrior to her rebel dad. I guess she really did have daddy issues all along. We all kind of assumed, right? Her father does come around on Rezkin and says that he will convince his men. Her father does end up coming around on Rezkin and says that he will convince his men to bow to Rezkin as well. Wesson comes downstairs dressed in his battle mage robes, finally officially accepting his position as not only King's Mage, but Battle Mage. Entress and Azaria meet Wesson for the first time, and turns out Wesson, our little guy, is a half demon, half human. His father had stolen a demon vessel meant for Rezkin and transferred it into his unborn child, hoping that it would not be able to cling to his soul because it hadn't been formed yet, but part of the demon did cling to Wesson's soul, and so he's got this bit of it in him, and the Ielvanon will be watching Wesson closely, but Rezkin believes that there's no better person to house the demon and to restrain it. Wesson has an unflappable strength of will, and I think Rezkin's right. He is the best person that could have possibly happened to. On the eve of the big battle, Azaria and Rezkin share a kiss, finally breaking some of the romantic tension between them, but years of Rezkin's training kicks in and he runs away, thinking himself stupid for being so vulnerable. He does recognize that he has feelings for her, though, which will play a big part in the next book. Something I may have neglected to mention is that Frisha gets taken captive because Za makes her go with him on his mission, and he leaves her in like a shitty motel room, and Frisha's there by herself, and then these people come in and take Frisha away, like basically kidnap her, and they put like this golem in her place. It's like this magical construct that looks and sounds exactly like Frisha, but it doesn't really act like her. It has to like learn how to act like Frisha. That golem goes to Kyle, and then Frisha gets taken away. And we later come back to Frisha, who she like wakes up in her cell and realizes that Prince Thressen is in her cell. Like this prince who has been missing the entire series is right in front of her, and he's in this jail cell. And then we find out that this is Cadian's doing, and they're in his like big like master fortress or whatever. And they come to the conclusion that Cadian has found a way to traverse great distances very quickly. And the Ielvenon believe that Cadian is also a spiritua, a human spiritua. We then meet Cadian for the very first time. It's the only time that he's been on page right in front of us, and he mostly antagonizes them and does the mustache twirling thing. He's a very like villain's villain. He just wants power and he wants to kill people. So that's kind of what Cadian's motives are. Back to the battle with Rezkin and Ashai and all that stuff. The battle is epic. Kai and Issaria fight a number of enemies, and it's amazing. Issaria is like dancing her way through the battlefield, just leaving, it says like swaths of crimson or something, and so I can picture it in my head so well. And then Rezkin fights from the back of Pride, who we finally get to see in action. Like, I mean, we've seen Pride in action, but I mean, Pride is really kicking ass in this scene. He's absolutely vicious. Rezkin takes out enemy strikers as well as various other creatures at Cadian's command, like Droglix. Wesson squares off against Master Roan, the head of the Battle Mage Academy that we met in Wesson's short story, his prequel story. And Roan is absolutely manic with power and believes that he is serving his king despite the evidence of demons all around. There's demons on the battlefield with him. He starts to pull in massive amounts of power as he starts conducting a spell that will kill Wesson, but Wesson is faster and has a deeper well of power as he taps into the demonic nature inside himself, and he starts his spell and has to rein it in at the last moment because it might destroy the entire battlefield. That's how big it is. But he's able to make it a jet stream towards Roan, and when he finally releases it, Roan is literally atomized and completely obliterated. When I say atomized, I mean Roan is turned into particles. Like, it completely decimates him, and it's such a cool spell. And also, not to mention, Roan had all these defenses up. He had all these wards like all around him that were like blocking all these incoming attacks, and Wesson's spell goes completely like straight through it all in a beeline towards Roan. And that's just how powerful Wesson is. He is able to disintegrate the most powerful mage in Ashai. Rezkin kills an entire group of demon-possessed mages, Berengish at their center. When Rezkin gets through the mages, he fights with Berengish, who is using a black, oily power Very demonic sounding, right? After some back and forth, Berengish falls through a hole that gets opened up in the floor, and a portal bursts into life with Cadian emerging from it. Cadian's eyes turn black. He definitely has some demonic possession within himself. Him and Rezkin fight, but ultimately Cadian attacks him with a demonic blast that makes Rezkin see all of the people that he's been close to that have died, like Pallas, and these ghosts kind of berate him for letting them die, and this is an illusion of some kind from Cadian, but Rezkin calls on the power of the Sieclia and disperses the illusion. However, the spell still takes hold of him and is rapidly making him die. Rezkin can either save himself or save everyone else, but he cannot do both. He decides to rush at Cadian and push him back into the portal, which he succeeds in doing, but whatever the spell was doing to him ultimately succeeds, and it kills Rezkin, along with the blast from the collapsing portal, which is kind of the final two things that really did it for Rezkin, and he is dead. Like, dead, dead, dead. Everyone mourns Rezkin and buries him in a tomb at the site of the battle. Farson is especially aggrieved, crying, "Save my boy," and regrets treating him how he has, but no one is able to help. There is nothing that can be done for him. The battle has turned in their favor, however, with Cadian's demonic forces on the run. In the epilogue, Berengish has survived and makes his way into the tomb and starts the work of a ritual which will not only bring Rezkin back from the dead, but also place a demon inside of him. He first carries out the Sen ritual, which has been worked on Rezkin many, many times, and then goes to start the demonic ritual, but Rezkin is able to wake up during this period of time after being brought back and kills both Berengish and his assistant. Rezkin decides to go on his own way and fight from the shadows, using his supposed death to his advantage. He had always felt encumbered by the weight and responsibilities of the crown, and now he can go get things done. As the book ends, his amulet starts to crack, and a small dragon emerges. Book 6, Night of Shadows. Frisha and Thressen are visited by Cadian, who gloats about Rezkin's death. We find out the Daemon want to kill the Fae and the humans, and that Cadian is specifically possessed by the Orb Weaver, and from what I understand, this is the leader of the Daemons. The Crown Prince Igrethiel has taken Cadian as its host. Cadian is super paranoid. He's had a voice in his head since he was a very young boy, even before being joined with the Daemon, proving that he is in fact a human spiritua who has gone mad at this point. He probably went mad a long time ago. He has his mages taking part in a ritual that bonds them to their own daemon, and he makes them generals in his twisted army. Wesson and Celise have officially been an item for a little while now, and we see that they are happily living together, and I would really love to know what some of their conversations are like now that Wesson has changed his mind, because he always kind of like talked down to Celise. I mean, he was nice to her, but he was very like dismissive, like, "No, Celise, we're not doing that." And I would love to see what a day in the life looks like for this new happy couple. It's been about 6 months since Rezkin died, and a team, including but not limited to the Ielvenon, Wesson, Raylan, Jimson, and some strikers, head to go see Rezkin's body to confirm his death for Queen Arisiel of Lan Laresh. Now, speaking of Raylan and Jimson, they are also an item now and basically go everywhere together. Again, I'd love to see more of these two, just a day in the life with how they interact with each other now that they are together. A really interesting part of this book that is cool just because it plays with point of view so much is before, when the Ielvenon talk, they have this I call it like a feeling word. Like they will say, "I don't like this," despondent, or "I'm glad to see you," happy, or something. Like they have a word at the end, and because we are in Rezkin's point of view for most of this series, he understands the words, and he kind of relays that to us by it being in his POV. But at this point in the book, we are not in Rezkin's POV. We're seeing this through, the eyes of Tyrion or, Farson or, any of these other characters. And during this time, when they do their little feeling word at the end of the sentence, it's in Fershea, the language of the elves, because Rezkin isn't there for us to understand this language. I thought that was just a really cool bit of writing. But anyway, they see the body is gone, but also they see the mark of the raven. They also see that somebody was killed there in an empty demon vessel. Azaria decides to go look for the raven. Entrust must go back to Kyle since it needs a Spiritua to continue running effectively, and that was something I hadn't even thought of at the end of the last book, is the whole reason Kylerum kind of came to life the way it has. We didn't know it at the time, but it is because of Rezkin's Spiritua nature. We catch back up with Rezkin, who now has a dragon youngling named Sina. Rezkin has a new power kind of based on his old power that Wesson discovered in book 2. If I didn't describe it earlier, it was the kind of Wesson thought there was a spell that lay over Rezkin because he could kind of convince anybody that he was anybody. So there was like a whole scene where Rezkin went to Wesson and said, "I am a sheep herder," and Wesson was like, "Oh my god, you're a sheep herder." So we kind of see that evolve in this book, and it turns into a full-on illusion where Rezkin is able to make himself look like anybody and influence people in the same way that he has been. Frisha and Thressen are still in their jail cell and are able to break out after months of scratching at the runes that bound the cell. There were like these runes that prohibited magic from being used, and they're able to score the ground deep enough with a rock or a piece of rubble or whatever, and they're able to get out of the cell, and they make their way to Shenaria. Rezkin acquires another Shaylin from a sword bearer who attacks him, a sword bearer who is loyal to Cadian, and I'm really curious what will come of this and who it will be granted to, because as we saw in the previous book, he granted one of his Shaylins to Tam. Frisha and Thressen meet a man on the road, Orovway, who is actually Rezkin in disguise, and they head to Kylerum. Meanwhile, Frisha's golem is making a mess of her reputation back at the Citadel. Azaria follows the bodies that the Raven leaves behind, trying to find out what he did with Rezkin's body. Eventually, she finds the Raven and has a tussle with him, almost capturing him, but he escapes. He also tells Azaria that the Emperor is still needed. She's like, "Why do you need the Emperor's body?" And he's like, "Well, because I have plans for the body, and like I need it. There's a reason why I've taken the Emperor." So he's not telling her everything, obviously, but he does tell her that she will see Rezkin again. At the time, she believes that she will see his body again. He will return the body to her. Frisha and Thressen return to Kyle just after the golem is found out to be sending info to Cadian. Tyrion thinks that this is Frisha. He has no reason to believe that it's a magical construct, and it's an entire mess. But eventually Tyrion realizes that Frisha is the real Frisha, and he says that he understands that it was her, but it will take time to come to terms with it and to get over everything this golem has done over the past few months, because it did a lot of really terrible things while posing as Frisha. And this is literally the last thing that we see of them in this book. I would have loved to have gotten a lot more. This isn't a review of this book, but I would have loved to have seen this play out just a little bit more. So hopefully we get that in the next one. And also, everyone is really surprised to see Thressen, and that's a bit of an understatement. This is somebody that everybody thought was dead, or had been kidnapped, which I guess he was, but nobody knew where Thressen was. And so that is a very big moment as well. Wesson is attacked by battle mages, and Rezkin intervenes, revealing himself to Wesson. He says that he has much to do before he reveals himself to everyone else, but Wesson says that the Empire will not survive without him, which fills Rezkin with unease, wondering if he's overestimated the capability of his kingdom. Rezkin goes to the northern fortress where General Markham and the other nobles argue over who will be the heir to the kingdom if they kill Cadian, and Rezkin uncovers an assassination attempt and kills those responsible. Later, a demon-possessed man sets a magical bomb up in the fortress, but Rezkin finds it and throws it off the bridge, blasting himself a little bit in the process. A few notable things happen during this general time in the book. Rezkin dreams of Azaria and tells her that he is alive. He's only willing to tell her in this dream landscape because he's not even really sure if they are real dreams. He thinks they are, but he feels like this is a fairly safe space to tell her. But he tells her not to tell Entrus. He cannot have Entrus dogging his heels while he's doing this whole undercover thing that he's doing now. He also visits the Black Hall and finds out that someone took a hit out on the Lareshi Queen, Arisiel, but the Black Hall was not able to find the origins of the contract, and of course they, don't take the contract because they're subservient to the real Gesh, which is Rezkin, and Rezkin secretly makes a mage relay for those at the northern fortress that connects to Kylerum, and the nobles at the fortress talk to Tyrion in Kylerum, and they make negotiations and garner an alliance. And overall, they're really surprised how far Tyrion has come. He's grown up quite a bit, and they were expecting, the spoiled brat to be talking to them, but he actually, stands his ground and negotiates and tries to come to some sort of understanding with all of the nobility at the northern fortress, and they're all really impressed with that. Another important part of this book is the new battle master who replaced Roan. His name is Avakiv, and he is trying to hold souls within crystals like Rezkin did with Isaria. Now, how he knows about what Rezkin did with the Soul Stone is unclear, and it kind of shows that there is either a spy or multiple spies in Kylerum feeding him information. Probably not just the Golem. Like, I don't know if Frisha's Golem would really know about the Soul Stone. It doesn't seem like something that Frisha even knew about. So there has to be multiple spies in Kylerum, I think. But Avakiv tracks down Isaria in Lon Laresh and keeps an eye on her, hoping to find her Soul Stone and take her back to Ashai for his experiments. Assyria arrives at her new villa in one of her echelons, and murder is afoot, guys. Her food that she gives to a kitchen boy is poisoned, and the boy dies. Assyria panics because she doesn't know how to protect herself against poison. She can fight with a sword, but she can't protect herself against poison. Rezkin goes and finds Tam, who has been swept away by the Anan, aka the Fae, to be the general of their army. He has basically full control of the Fae beings. They're kind of like at his whim. They mostly do as he commands, but they will not release him from where they have him. They're wanting him to train to be their general, and they're going to use him for that purpose, and Rezkin can't really get him out of this one. This plot point doesn't really go anywhere in this book, but that's where Tam is, and I expect this to be a big deal later on. Arisiel was killed off-screen by an unknown assassin, which frees up Rezkin from his obligations to Arisiel, and Isaria is allowed to keep her echelons that Arisiel wanted to take away from her, and Rezkin shows himself to Isaria and Malseus, and they also meet Sina, the dragon. He wants her to take the throne of Lon Laresh and to claim Sarunius as a consort. to kind of help protect her from the demon mage who is hunting her, but also from the rest of the court. The Lareshi court is just really kind of subtly hostile, and Rezkin knows that Eseria won't necessarily be able to navigate it, but Sarunius certainly will know how to navigate the court after doing it with Arisiel for so long. Rezkin cannot reveal himself at this time. They want him to reveal himself as the emperor and lay claim to Lan Laresh, but he thinks that that would start a civil war, and so he's going to stay invisible and basically just be with them until she has successfully claimed the throne for herself. The big moment comes, and Rezkin also tells her about how he stopped the ritual back in Book 3, with part of her soul being trapped in a crystal that Malseus bears. She is shocked that he has stayed ever true to his purpose and has remained by her side for more than a year. She had absolutely no idea that this is happening, and she can't believe that he has just kind of taken on this burden silently. He has never tried to use it against her or anything like that. He's never held it over her head. He's just stayed true to his purpose and just been humbly accepting of it, and she is blown away. So Eseria goes and claims Saronius, who accepts and tells her that he will help her win the throne, but is not open to a romantic entanglement, which she is more than fine with. She also claims the throne, but has others vying for the throne as well. Another contender calls the right of trial, which makes all the contenders compete in various contests to showcase their talents and leadership abilities. It does not guarantee them the throne, but at the end of the trials and everything, everyone will kind of vote, and, you know, the person that has garnered the most affection during these trials will likely win. The first trial is a debate on various topics, which Rezkin helps them prepare for, and Malseus is chosen to do the debating because he is actually quite good at it and very aware of political maneuverings and things. During the debate, a question is asked about what each contender plans to do about their relationship with the Empire, and Malseus surprisingly speaks very highly of both Rezkin and the Empire, and during this he realizes that he has truly forgiven Rezkin. The quote is, "Tears welled in his eyes and dried on his cheeks as his resentment slipped away." And I love that quote. I think it's such good prose. I mentioned it when we talked about this book in our spoiler discussion, so I won't dwell on it, but I love it so much. The next trial is basically an economic test where they have to make deals with other nations for trade goods. They accrue points based on how well the trade is balanced in Lareshi favor. The more points they accrue, the more of their team will die due to poisoning. Everyone on the team must drink a glass of wine at the end of the trade, and depending on the score that you get in the trade agreement, a certain number of them are poisoned and will kill the person that drinks it, and there is nothing they can do about it. They can't back out of it. There's no way out of this. So it's a big deal, and everyone is really terrified, especially Eseria, who that night, in what may be the best scene of the book, she goes to Malseus and tries to force him not to take part in the trial, but he insists. She says, "But why? You hate me." And he confesses that he does not hate her. Matter of fact, back in Scutton in Book 2, he had seen her before Pallas did and was enamored with her, but he could not lay down his duty to his house in order to court her. However, Pallas did, and it made Malseus extremely jealous. Once Pallas died, he still had an attraction to Eseria, but he took his anger out on her unjustly and on Rezkin as well. He then bore her life stone after Rezkin had asked him to, and realized that he loved her and has stood at her side in silence to keep her safe. Eseria is overwrought with emotion and kisses him, saying, "I think I love you too." Just then, Rezkin appears, having gone invisible during this whole, showing of emotions thing, and not wanting to interrupt. He tells them that he was able to negotiate tomorrow's deal so that no one will die. But remember, there's 3 of them. There's 3 deals that they have to get through. So that trade goes through fine, but then Malseus ends up getting poisoned in the deal after that one, and Assyria holds him while he dies, telling him that she's sure that he loves him now if only he'll survive. A guard shows up, grasping Assyria's hand, and to her surprise, Rezkin reveals his face momentarily under the guard illusion. He hands her an antidote for Malseus, and she forces it down his throat, and he survives. The final trial is between Assyria and Cyrenius and Grovelda and Morton, the latter 2 being, an opposing contender for the throne, and Cyrenius is on Assyria's side, obviously. And the battle commences, and basically what's about to happen is there's like a battle between these 2 groups, and they kind of fight for dominance. And Rezkin shows up to briefly tell Assyria that there are demons down in the town square while this battle is going on, and he's going to go help, and he's sure that she and Cyrenius can win this trial, and that she should just stay here and do that. She and Cyrenius are getting battered by the other 2, but start to make promising headway until Trivian, the demon mage who's been hunting her, shows up and kills Grovelda. Before she died, she actually opened this giant chasm in the earth, complete with a lava pit at the bottom. And Trivian kills Cyrenius, who is protecting Assyria, and almost dispatches Assyria, but she runs at him and tackles him into the chasm, thinking that, he's going to cause so much harm to Lan Laresh, and this is her home. This is the place that she's from. And so she decides to give up her life to kill this demon mage. So Assyria is falling to her death when at the last second, of course, Malseus grabs her arm and tells her that he will always catch her when she falls. With Trivian and the others all dead, Assyria is the last one standing, literally the last contender for the throne standing. So she wins by default, and she is crowned the Queen of Lan Laresh. Important to note that the people were very excited about her too. She didn't just win by default. She would have been the one voted into place because she just saved them from this big demon attack. And within her first few minutes as queen, she proves to be way better of a queen than Arisiel ever was. Arisiel was very concerned about herself and protecting herself, and Assyria makes it known right from the get-go, we're going to go into the town and we're going to protect the villagers and keep them safe from these demons and try to clean up and restore the town as best we can. So meanwhile, while all that was happening, Rezkin is down there battling the demons in the town, and we see some really interesting effects from the Black Blade. It is extremely potent against the demons, slicing right through their armor and their hide and their spells, and it suffuses him with a green electricity. He kills all the demons in one of the best action scenes of the series so far, and heads to Healer Your Way to be mended. Did I mention that he can also teleport like Azaria can, but he doesn't have the power innate in him. His dragon does. So his dragon and him are able to work together and kind of fast travel the way that Azaria does. But yeah, he heads to Healer Your Way to be mended. Upon his arrival, we find out that Your Way has made a mage oath to the king under duress. Now, this is something that is mentioned a couple times in this book. It's this mage oath made under duress. Both Wesson and Rezkin mention it multiple times, saying, yeah, you did make a mage oath, but it was under duress. I wonder if that means something. And Wesson believes that he can circumvent such a mage oath. Now, again, not to do the review thing here, but I don't know if I like this because the mage oath was such a binding way to make sure of something and to bind someone to another person. Um, and I think it would just be interesting if they found a way around the mage oath that some of these mages are swearing to Cadian. But if Wesson just kind of finds some magical way around it, I don't know if it'll be as satisfying. But anyway, back in Lawn the Resh, Rezkin says goodbye to Asaria and Malseus, who tell him he needs to depend on his friends more, not just for tasks or missions, but also for companionship, and Rezkin agrees. Rezkin also tells them that Cadian has bigger plans for Lawn the Resh, not just the assassination of Arisiel, but he's not sure what they are yet, and it's up to Asaria and Malseus to find out. I don't know if we'll get more of them in the next book. I would guess that the POVs are going to shift to some other characters that we've been meaning to get back to. But I fully expect to come back to Asaria and Malseus at some point and kind of find out what's going on with Cadian's plans for Lawn the Resh. He then goes back to Kyle, and he's actually disguised as Eurovoy, and he goes and reveals himself to Azaria, who is ecstatic to see him, and they share a passionate kiss. He reveals that he is the Raven and explains why he has not revealed himself, which she accepts. You know, he's not wanting to reveal himself because he doesn't want Cadian to know he's alive, and he can maneuver throughout the kingdom much, much easier if he doesn't have strikers dogging his heels and Entrus dogging his heels and, you know, all these other enemies and everything kind of, you know, on the lookout for him. If they believe that he's dead, Cadian has very little interest in Kyle, and so it also kind of protects everybody that's there. And so Rezkin basically woke up from the tomb and was like, hey, this is a great deal for me. Like, I can be fully undercover, I can be a total shadow, and you know, I won't really have to deal with all this attention that I've been getting as the Emperor. But anyways, Azaria vows to stand by him and protect him from Entrus, since once Entrus finds out that Rezkin is alive, he will assume that he's mad and kill him, because why else would this person leave his empire, leave his friends, and just be gone for months and months and months and months? She will be going with Rezkin from here on out and staying by his side, and he will reveal everything that has happened. She will be going with Rezkin from here on out and staying by his side, and he will reveal everything that has happened to her over the past few books. All of the info that she's kind of missing on Rezkin, he promises to tell her. And so I almost kind of think that's how the next book will start, is Rezkin and Azaria on the road, and him just like telling her everything that's kind of gone on over the past. I mean, in world, it has to be like a year or two that all of this has been going on. So I'm interested to see how that happens, but that's where it ends for now with book 6. In the next book, I'm hoping to see more of the two Brants. I'd love to know how they cope with having an exact copy of themselves, and hopefully they become really good friends. I also want to see more of Tyrion and Frisha repairing their relationship, since we only got the one scene with the two of them actually together in this book at the same time. And I want to see what kind of fallout Frisha has to deal with after the Golem kind of paraded around as her for months and months and months. This Golem has been inhabiting Kylerum. So I really want to see how she has to maneuver all that and kind of explain her way out of that. I also definitely want to see more of Tam. I think it's well past time for him to get his big glow up moment and become an actual major player in the story, seeing as we kind of got shafted in the 6th book, only getting about a paragraph or so with him. And I really want him to reunite with Ilanette or Nettie. because they were definitely on their way to becoming an item before he, got captured and everything. Now, of course, I still read the series to see what happens with Rezkin and his story, but I think it's amazing how all these other characters are really taking the spotlight and kind of shifting my perspective on what I'm excited to see next. It kind of shifted from, I want to see Rezkin go and like assassinate people and do all this cool, like shadowy stuff. But there's so many characters now that I care about so much, and I really don't mind when I just get a POV chapter of those characters, because at this point I care about them equally, as much as I do Rezkin. So I really want to see all these characters level up, so to speak, because they're really going to need it if they're going to defeat Kadian. We've already seen that Rezkin can't do it by himself, and he's going to need help from all these other, major players in the story. And so I'm hoping that we see, whatever's going to happen with Tam or even Frisha, like kind of how she develops. For a while I thought she was going to go with the Adana Row, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen now. But we need to see these characters start to gain more and more power in order to be useful in, surely the final battle that's coming. I also really want to see Rezkin reveal himself to certain people, especially Farson and Tyrion, as I think they will have the biggest reaction to seeing that Rezkin is alive. Although I kind of think Tyrion needs to believe that Rezkin is dead for a little while longer, in order to continue to grow into the person that he's going to become. It kind of seems like he's going to be set up to be either king or maybe even the emperor. And, there was a moment in book 5, or really since book 4, where Tyrion is like, these things are happening, like I'm going to pass it to you to solve it. And Rezkin's like, you can do it. Like, you can solve it on your own. Like, just figure out the problem. And then in book 5, when Rezkin, he wakes up from the dart that he got hit with, and Tyrion is like giving him the lowdown on everything that's happened over the past few weeks. And Rezkin's like, well, did you solve the problems? And Tyrion's like, well, yeah, I did. He's like, there you go. There you go. So Tyrion is, and we see everything that he's doing in this book while everybody thinks that Rezkin is dead. And he really is stepping up to the plate and trying to do what he needs to do to be a good ruler as much as he can be. And so, maybe Rezkin needs to be gone for a little bit longer in order for him to become that person that takes full responsibility of this kingdom. And I really, really like his character arc, and I'm excited to see where he goes. Also, if we don't get more Raylan and Jimson, I will, in fact, riot. But that's all I have for now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this recap. I'll probably start doing them every book or two so that people have a quick recap that they can go to prepare for the next book. It seems like she's going to be doing these about once a year, and I'm really excited for this faster publishing pace. Although I do wish these later books were quite a bit longer, since there are so many plot threads that are all going at the same time now. I would appreciate a longer book for sure. Let me know down in the comments what you're most excited for with this new book, and let me know if I can improve anything on these recaps. This video was so massive and took so many hours of writing, recording, and editing. I'm sure I missed things and maybe didn't have the best delivery at times, but I really hope it helps jog your memory for future installments of King's Dark Tidings. We'll see you again when we do our big spoiler discussion for Book 7, and then shortly after that when we actually have Kelcade on the podcast to talk about it as well. So be sure to leave any questions for her down below, or send them to us on like Twitter or email. All that stuff is in the description. With that, thank you so much for watching and observing Rule 96 by doing so. Rezkin would approve.